learn to become like politicians and stick to the time, because in my industry it's quite rife with fashionable lateness and it's nothing to be proud of. Please accept my apology. So in May, no, actually in March, I was in Addis Ababa on the invitation of the British Council. We had a roundtable discussion on languages and development in Africa. And I then took the opportunity to meet with our chairperson of the AU, Dr. Zuma. And the reason why I wanted to meet with her is because I had read her amazing vision for 2063, and she had written it in a letter form addressed to Kwame Nkrumah from 50 years, in fact, from 100 years into his future. And she had mapped out this vision of an integrated Africa, a progressive Africa, and an Africa that is a world leader. And she explained that we would have every reason to be a world leader in the future because Africa is the richest continent in the world. And the reason why I wanted to meet with her is because I felt she was possibly making the same mistake that most African leaders do make in their exclusion of the arts and culture when they talk of development on the African continent. And I thought that the reason why we have such a slow-moving train when it comes to the unity that we so desperately need for Africa to progress was because we, time and time again, we take the arts and culture out of the center of Africa's progress. And thus Arch was born, and Arch is Africa Reimagined Creative Hub. I proposed to her that I would like to gather artists, Pan-African artists from the continent and the diaspora, together in Addis Ababa to write the Arts and Culture chapter of the AU's Agenda 2063. And to my surprise, she agreed to this very ambitious vision of mine. And I was then given 2 months to find all of these artists and have them together in Addis on the 21st of May to the 25th of May, which is Africa Day. Let me just read here quickly. Years ago, I had a long-standing debate with a fellow activist who insisted that culture and identity were secondary to the freeing of the African, if at all important. In actuality, he felt that they were a distraction from the fundamental work of freeing the African, as if feeling the stomach of the African will also imbue her with a sense of self and assist her to find her place in the world. Needless to say, my relationship with that concept cannot be salvaged. And today he's in Parliament. I wish him all the best. Biko spoke of the empty heart of the African. Kwesikwa Pra moans that underdeveloped Africa remains so partly on the account of cultural alienation. Cultural identity is not the beads or the kutas or the sishweshwe, as some clever and possibly annoying person will tell you. These come from Europe. But cultural identity is how we bend the world to suit our idea of beauty, how we explain the wonders of the world, and how those explanations give birth to new inventions as we shape the world to our own aesthetic. Before you know it, you have a buzzing hub of activity and you call it a village, or a town, or a city. You call it living, life. The beads, the sishweshwe, suddenly take on a different life in the hands of an African. The African will do with gold what the European would never think of doing, because they draw from different worlds, and both their contributions are equally important. So, Africa is a stranger to herself, and we need to bring her home. And that is why Arch was formed. Africa needs to be reintroduced to herself. Yesterday, Professor Simphiwe Zondi said something similar, and I found that we are all on the same page. We need to refamiliarize ourselves with Africa, and let Africa refamiliarize herself with us, so we can be confident in our own abilities. Xenophobia, tribalism, these are signs that Africa has lost sight of her source, her center. In the term we used to use when I was a barefoot village girl, in my language culture, it is imbumba yamanyama, unity. An elder will illustrate this by making us gather lots of sticks. We would be asked to break them one by one and then break them as a bundle. The sticks would break easily individually, but never as a bundle. The elder would then gather our hands in his big hands, look us in the eye with a smile, and say, imbumba yamanyama. The role of arts and culture is to be the glue that holds the sticks together, our shared forgotten humanity. I always make the example of South Africa and Nigeria. How just a few years ago we could hardly stand each other in South Africa. And how thanks to arts and culture, our relationship has improved 100%. Let me remind you of the great work that was done by MTV Base, and Channel O. 9 years later, you have the doors of tourism between the two countries open as wide as a highway. South Africans try to speak Pidgin, and Nigerians greet us in our own languages. And as I'm standing here right now, tonight, Nigeria celebrates 54 years of independence at the popular Kong nightclub with Davido as the artist of the hour. Davido is from Nigeria. Nigeria is very popular in South Africa, and so is South Africa and Nigeria. The cross-pollination of cultures made us realize we are born of the same roots. The way that the Germans, the French, the Dutch, especially, etc., are born of the same roots. I believe that Africa is a country contrary to our protests. Africa needs to be a country to fulfill her mandate to her people. It is only with this mentality that we will bring about progress for our people. Individuality is for individuals, not for civilizations. Individuality is not how you bring about a renaissance. So we observe with concern as Arch the new immigration visa developments that were initiated by South Africa. And that had Kenya retaliate, and I believe at least one or two more countries are also thinking how they will retaliate to these new visa laws. We do respect the sovereignty and security of all our countries on the continent, but we also believe that these new laws will set back the vision of African unity. Yes, I envision in Africa that the holiday is on its own soil, carried there by the smells, sounds, and rhythms that seem all too familiar, even if they are strange. And the whole world will come to our shores too, to taste our sadza, dance to our kora, and drink our palm wine. I envision an Africa that is home to its own. No more xenophobia, I call it Afrophobia. No more tribalism, because Africa is one tribe. A tribe that has forgotten its source, like a river that cannot see itself for its tributaries. In the near future, I envision Umusi, known as the mother of Africa's high fashion. I envision Tomani Diabate and Princess Magogo's music being the mainstream curriculum in our music institutions. I envision Shakespeare being replaced by Ben Okri and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I envision Chinwezu being our reference point when we think of African politics. I envision the day Okonko ceases to exist in our subconscious, because Africa will no longer carry the image of the emasculated patriarch, but that of a griot bringing gifts to a young world. I envision the death of patriarchy in our cultures. Women shall take their rightful place alongside men. I see the revival and elevation of Africa's spirituality. I envision the death of religions that seek to divide us along colonial lines. I envision schools of African excellence in Timbuktu, Egypt, and Tanzania, which will carry our knowledge through the ages. I envision an Africa that harvests its knowledge systems, never to be exploited by others again. I see grand inventions that the world will otherwise never give birth to. I see sustainable cities whose Afrocentric architecture will be sensitive to our planet. Means of travel will not pollute our skies. medicine will not pollute our bodies because invention should be a spiritual art, lest it be harmful. I see an aggressive overhaul of Africa's arrested cultural development. I envision an Africa that can communicate with itself no longer with a colonial voice. An Africa that speaks the same language in the same voice. An Africa that leads the world with love. Biko did say that the greatest gift we have to give humanity is a human face. And that is love. Now, we, the Pan-African activists and artists from the creative society from all the corners of the African continent and diaspora, gathered in Addis Ababa from the 21st to the 25th of May to consider, shape, and reimagine the narrative of the Africa we want to see by the year 2063. We also took the opportunity to network, collaborate, and take stock of the progress of our various crafts and sectors, whilst also considering the input and role of heritage, art, and culture in shaping Africa's Agenda 2063. Appreciating the efforts made by the African Union, the chairperson, and the African Union at large to gather us and seek our inputs in the development of a 50-year vision and a shared strategic framework for inclusive growth and sustainable development for Africa. Reaffirm the cardinal role played by the arts and culture and the broader creative society in the promotion of Pan-Africanism and the African Renaissance, as well as in the development of our people and our economics. Acknowledge that we must unlock the African creative economy towards realizing a united, integrated, and prosperous continent at peace with itself. Note the common challenges we face as members of the broad creative society and commit to ensure the upliftment of the creative society and our communities. Believe Africa has a positive and inspirational narrative to tell, and those we own and have a common identity and are proud of our culture, heritage, and diverse languages. Are determined to ensure the repatriation of our identity, culture, heritage, and artifacts. Commit ourselves to the broad objectives of a united and prosperous Africa and her diasporas at peace with herself, and agree to the development of a prioritized, time-bound, resourced, and institutionalized program of action for the arts and culture towards Agenda 2063. To which end, we call on all African governments to promote, develop, and implement cultural diplomacy by, amongst others, ensuring that all embassies, high commissions, and representative offices include art and culture attaches and all representatives to commit to displaying, showcasing, exhibiting Africa-produced art and cultural artifacts and artistic products in their places of work, encounter, and engagement. Request all African governments to promote and consider supporting national networks and organizations which will be consisted by members from the creative society, so as to promote the arts and culture and grow the African creative industries and economies sustainably, as well as to ensure the well-being of the members of the creative economy in a sustainable manner. Encourage all African governments and the African Union to implement programs and projects which will ensure that an African museum is established on the continent and in the diaspora. Call on governments in Africa to implement a local and African content quota system. Further, call on African governments to encourage more Pan-African programming and the establishment of mediums and media which will promote the heritage, arts, and culture of the continent. Call on the African Union Commission to expand and strengthen the existing cultural office to provide capacity to coordinate and develop continental policies and norms and standards for the heritage, arts, and culture sector with immediate effect. Request the African Union Commission to provide an institutional framework for arts so we can do our work as a creative community. Invite the private sector, intergovernmental, governmental, and non-governmental partners to support on an equal and transparent basis the arts program of action and its urgent goals. Commit to promote African languages and indigenous knowledge systems in our societies and sectors through curriculum development and implementation in the continent and her diaspora. Contribute to the development within the AU of a cultural policy education strategy program that will empower people within the AU, member states, and other professionals to understand a deeper level of cultural diplomacy, policy making, law and development to integrate general cultural and artistic strategies and activities into the program of the AU. Can I continue?
You are left to
Okay. We further commit ourselves individually and collectively to act towards ensuring that we, with regard to the visual arts, contribute to the building of a permanent library, archive and resource center at the AU compound, which shall also have a virtual dimension and will include knowledge-based material and other audiovisual elements. I don't think I will be able to finish in time, Chair. I'll try. Initiate and sustain a program that will facilitate each of the following annual Pan-African events in different locations on the continent, which will include a photo and film festival, visual art convention, a music event, an architecture summit, a fashion event, a literature conference and forum, gastronomy festival, and a technology and design festival. Create, maintain, and promote an accessible database of Pan-African artists, practitioners, and activities taking place on the continent and in the diaspora, both past and present. Develop a program for public art prioritizing the construction and rehabilitation of accessible African commemorative and descriptive monuments and artworks in public spaces in Africa. Embark on a program to develop infrastructure for art education by building art institutions of higher learning in different regions. Ensure that the African Union buildings and public offices of member states embrace and display African artwork. With regards to media and communications, commit to exploring collaborative mechanisms to revamp the current capacities towards the implementation of a Pan-African broadcasting service or corporation with a continental radio and TV station to tell our own stories in our languages so as to promote continental priorities such as tourism, agriculture, and peace and conflict resolution. Which institutions should also have an online dimension so as to reach the diaspora. Commit to lobbying and ensuring the creation of a best practice framework for the creation and diffusion of cultural assets, including copyright issues and open access. Which framework should be complemented by a copyright strategy that provides for the digitizing of our cultural heritage. Music. Commit to ensure and develop a program which will ensure that arts and culture remain at the center of African unity so as to contribute to the realization of Agenda 2063. Work towards developing an online portal and database for art professionals and industry professionals. Lobby and advocate for an African artist visa which will enable free movement of creative economy professionals. Develop a mechanism which will accrue sales, royalties, and income to art so as to invest in the art program of action. I think I have to stop there. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, everyone.